Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to Ascending Order with me, Basil Valentine, today, Wednesday, the 3rd of September, 2025. This is your geopolitical news hour here on Unprecedented TV, and today I have a couple of special guests, I'm pleased to say. They are the investigative journalist Jacqui Devoy and her colleague, the filmmaker Richie Brown. And in the second half of the program, we'll be having a look at their new film, Unseen, which has a look at the death protocols that were introduced during the COVID farrago that resulted in the premature deaths of dozens of people in care homes up and down the country. Absolutely fascinating and revealing. And will there be any consequences? That's the key thing. I'll be asking Jacqui and Richie about that in the second half of the program. But first, Westminster is currently engulfed in Prime Minister's question time, the usual Yahoo politics with Kemi Badenoch and Keir Starmer talking about anything other than the biggest issue in the world today, of course, which is the genocide in Gaza. Both of them fully support it. They're both paid up members of the Zionist death cult. Angela Rayner is another one. She might be forced out as a result of underpayment of stamp duty on her flat down on the south coast, £800,000 property. Where did she get the money to buy somewhere like that? I would like to know. And this government, of course, now at a record unpopularity. Just 11% of voters in the latest poll approve of what they're doing. 70% disapprove. I believe we had a break in the stream there. Apologies. It's raining heavily. It may be something to do with that. Atmospheric conditions, gremlins in the machine. Who knows? Perhaps the government don't like what I'm saying. As I was saying, 70% of people polled disagree or disapprove of the government's handling of the nation. Just 11% approve. 70 plus 11, of course, makes 81. 19% don't know, obviously, too stupid to work out that they're being comprehensively shafted. As I said, Prime Minister's question time, they try and avoid talking about the great moral and humanitarian issue of our time, which is the genocide in Gaza, officially designated as such by the world's leading scholarly body on the subject. But here we keep it front and central. I find it absolutely extraordinary, really, that there are commentators out there, including that bloke Simon on History Debunked, poking fun at Greta Thunberg in particular, and Susan Sarandon, Liam Cunningham, and everybody else on the flotilla, because they want to break an illegal, really evil siege and bring humanitarian assistance to starving men, women, and children, taking baby formula to starving babies. This is something to be mocked, is it? Truly bizarre. Anyway, I'm pleased to say I've got an up-to-date report. It's not great news, I'm afraid. It seems that the dark forces are menacing the flotilla while it's still even in the Western Mediterranean, not very far from Barcelona where it launched, as you can see now.
We are now around 8 to 9 hours away from the Balearic island of Menorca. and we spotted a few drones above our vessels. We know that in a mission like ours, spotting drones is an alert situation because 4 months ago our boat was bombed by 2 Israeli drones between Malta and Italy, and something that concerns us because we are a humanitarian, non-violent mission that aims to break the siege and create a humanitarian corridor for the Palestinian people in Gaza that have been suffering 8 decades of genocide, 18 years of an illegal siege, and have been living through famine, through so many violations. So it's very disturbing that a mission that is completely legal according to international law would suffer this type of criminalization, this type of attempt to intimidate, and we will not bow to that. We were surveilled before all of our missions, to be honest. They had drones above our head. So we will not stop about that. We train our people. This is an opportunity for them to learn, to bring more cohesion in their teams as well, and to be ready. We know that we are dealing with an oppressive regime that has been killing humanitarian workers, that have been killing more civil defense workers than any other moment in history, more healthcare workers than any other moment in history, more UN workers than any other moment in history, but they still keep going. So if the Palestinian people keeps on going, how can we stop? So we continue going. We understand this risk, we do not neglect it, we prepare for it, but we keep on going. Why would someone bother if there's people trying to bring food to starving children? You need to be such a twisted mind to think that this is a security threat for you.
Indeed, or indeed a subject for mirth of any kind. Here, just to remind us, are some of the Holocaust survivors in children, some of the kids that it seems particularly sick minds want to continue to deprive of the sustenance required for life. And of course, the Israelis like to crow about how the fact that they don't target civilians. I mean, if you believe that, I've got some shares in an oil well under Brighton Beach I'd like to sell you, because they confess to it to themselves. Now, I'm going to play a clip now, which originates from a Palestinian social media account. This chap contacts Israelis directly in a bid to find out what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're up to. He's always very friendly and polite, and provides a window into the Zionist mindset and indeed their activities. So some of you might find this shocking. It's not, there's nothing gory about it. There's no horror in this scene, but there's a confession that a lot of people might find rather disturbing.
Israel kills children, women.
Man, I only killed 4. It's only 4.
You kill 4?
Only 4, only.
Are you IDF soldier?
Yes. Want to see?
Yes. You IDF soldier? You killed 4 Palestinians.
Only 4, man. It's only 4. What happened?
But you killed 4 persons.
No, children, not person.
You killed 4 children.
Only 4, man. You're missing the only.
How do you sleep?
Sleep? On the bed with a pillow.
But you killed 4 children.
Only 4, man. You're missing the only. It's missing the only.
Listen.
Say only and that's it. Say only 4. If I killed 5, you see 5 is more. Say only 4.
Where are you from?
One day, maybe one day, but not today. Please, please. 1 kebab, please. Give.
1 kebab?
I did kebab of the girl I kill, and I want to do mix.
Really?
The boy and the girl, yes.
You
Do
are so
alaish.
funny.
Direct evidence there where it needed that we are dealing with homicidal psychopaths and apparently of a cannibalistic nature. She said at the end there that she made a kebab out of the little girl that she'd killed. I don't know whether she ate it or not, but this really is quite exceptional stuff. Obviously, she's a murderer. The question is, will she ever be brought to justice? Or are the Israelis allowed to kill children with impunity and then go on holiday around the world as if nothing had happened? I hope that that woman can and will be identified by the Hind Rajab Foundation and at some point in the future brought to justice, because the very least she deserves is to spend the rest of her life in jail. And if you disagree with me, then, well, you know, it's indicative of the moral turpitude to which we've sunk. Now, on the right of the political spectrum in the United States, or even on the far right, sits Alex Jones, the conspiracy theorist, one of the biggest supporters of Donald Trump in his re-election campaign last year. It's indicative of the extent to which Israel is losing support among all sectors of American society. Lots of town halls with representatives and senators being barracked by their own constituents. I'm not focusing on that today, but I do want to just play this clip because it also includes a terrific montage of the death and destruction in Gaza, where Colonel Douglas McGregor is pointing out to Alex and his viewers that what we're seeing is not a war, but is simply mass slaughter.
Well, we need to understand something. Gaza is not a war, Alex. It's simply mass murder with U.S. funding. Children starve and are bombed and killed while lobbyists receive fat checks. And that's outrageous nonsense. And it's not just the lobbyists, it's members of Congress. There's something really, really wrong when we're supposed to stand for freedom. We're supposed to stand for truth, justice, and the American way, as we used to say it. We should stop enabling what is absolutely genocidal killing. And we're not. We're not. We're underwriting it. We're pushing it. I don't know why President Trump will not step forward and simply tell the truth. The rest of the world knows what's happening. We're hurting ourselves. Our reputation is being destroyed. He needs to tell the truth. And all he has to do is say, look, I love Israel. Fine, go ahead and love Israel. And I want Israel to be successful. I don't know of anybody I've talked to that doesn't want Israel to be successful. But this is not success. This is mass murder. And they're trying to tie this to a war with Iran. And a war with Iran right now, how do I put this? It's like kicking a beehive with your bare feet. The stings are not going to land on big donors to the lobby or the members of Congress. They're going to land on our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. It's going to hurt our families in the future. The world knows what's happening. The world has sorted this out. We need to distance ourselves from this. And if President Trump said, that's it, I'm suspending lethal aid until Prime Minister Netanyahu reaches some sort of an agreement with his opponents, then I think it would all stop.
Well, that's right. Trump, was recently asked, do you want to end the war in Gaza? Or do you want to, and he said, well, yeah, but you got to talk to Netanyahu about that. Well, no, we're the main funder, 9% of it. No, we have the power, just like what we're funding, like 85% of the Ukraine war. That's why Trump said he holds the cards. Why not play the cards?
Well, isn't he the president of the United States, not Netanyahu? So at what point in time do we have to ask Mr. Netanyahu for permission to stop funding genocide, or for that matter, bankrolling a wider war with Iran? War with Iran is extremely dangerous. It's not only dangerous because right now Iran is probably stronger than it's ever been. The biggest lie that is being spread by the Israelis through the mainstream media is Iran is weak, that the population is not standing with it. That's wrong. In fact, Iran and its people are more united around the current government than they have ever been in their history. And that doesn't mean they love the mullahs. There are a lot of people in Iran that are unhappy with that. But right now, Iran, the nation itself, is under attack. It's back to regime change and balkanization. That's what the Israelis want to do. They want to turn Iran into Syria. We have no interest in seeing Iran destroyed. Iran is not our blood enemy. And this notion that it's the repository of the greatest terrorism is nonsense. The overwhelming majority of terrorism has come out of Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Sunni Islamic Middle East. These aren't the people that have been trying to kill us. We somehow or another have to get the truth out. It's very, very difficult. We know everything's against us, but Washington has got to stop treating foreign policy like DoorDash, order up a new war, and then make the rest of us delivery drivers.
Indeed. And I'm pleased to say that there is a stirring amongst the conscience of the American people. A whole slew of anti-war candidates look like they're going to be challenging for election to the House of Representatives in the midterms. Amongst them is the Democrat Graham Plattner, and it's worth listening to a brief excerpt of his most recent speech and listen to the cheer he gets when he says that US tax dollars should be spent on doing things to improve the lives of ordinary Israelis rather than destroying lives in the Middle East.
Our taxpayer dollars can build schools and hospitals in America, not bombs to destroy them in Gaza. We can take back the wealth that belongs to us, that has been stolen by corrupt politicians and the corporations that bought them. We can use government to usher in a golden age for unions and workers, not double down on gig work and union busting for the benefit of Wall Street and CEOs. And we can have an economy and a government that works for the 99% and not just for the 1%.
Expect Graham to be the recipient of very negative campaigning from the AIPAC-sponsored candidate that he will be opposing. We can't have people talking like that in Congress, can we now? My goodness me, wanting to spend American tax dollars on improving the lives of ordinary Americans. What an extraordinary thing to suggest. Now, if we want to dig a little deeper, coming to the number 2 story on Ascending Order today, we find that of course, Jeffrey Epstein is still lurking in the shadows, and his blackmail operation. Yesterday, there were hearings in Congress, the first time that any of the victims, the survivors of his child sex ring, were able to speak. Now, Representative Nancy Mace, she left in tears. She says she's a survivor of abuse herself. The whole thing became too emotionally distressing for her. Lots more files have been released. Trump, of course, calling it a hoax. Let's hear from some of the congressmen and women who were at yesterday's hearings, starting with Anna Paulina Luna, who has led the charge on this issue.
Right now, the biggest thing that stands out to me is the victims themselves have stated that this is a lot bigger than I think anyone anticipated. We are obviously going to be requesting the SARS reports from Treasury, and also following up on that. There's some very rich and powerful people that need to go to jail. I think everyone's been frustrated as to why that hasn't happened before. But it is very much so a possibility that Jeffrey Epstein was an intelligence asset working for our adversaries. But also, I think the questions that we have is how much did our own government know about it? And so there's more to follow, and I'm sure you'll be hearing from the chairman momentarily. But I do applaud the victims from coming forward, because we heard from a woman who was as young as 14 years old when she was victimized multiple times by Jeffrey Epstein. So that's hard to hear.
Will you sign the discharge petition, the massive discharge petition?
I think that the files will probably be released prior. I don't know why Comer hasn't. I think that he should do it, so it wouldn't even have to come to a vote. But I mean, obviously, I've been a huge advocate, even when I was the only one in Congress calling for the release of those files. So I think I'd be happy to, yes. Thank you.
What do they call for the victims? Do they want those files released?
The victims want information to be out there, but they don't want their personal information, I think, for good reason to be out there. So I think from the get-go, even the Attorney General stated that there's victim information that you have to make sure that's private, being that some of the victims also, too, are as young as 14. That child child pornography. No, thank you guys.
Okay, let her through.
We have to ask ourselves, why would the victims not want to go public? I believe some of them are going to give a press conference today. Is it because they're still in fear of their lives? The other significant thing that Anna Paulina Luna said there was that Epstein was indeed an intelligence asset working for a foreign adversary. I wonder who that is. Was he working for the Russians? That's who the Americans regard as their adversary, or perhaps the Iranians, maybe Venezuela. Trump's decided that they're in the crosshairs now. I don't think he was working for any of those countries. I think we all know who he was working for, and it's linked to the previous story, why the United States continues to supply diplomatic cover and unbelievable amounts of firepower to the genocidal regime in Tel Aviv. Here's Yasmin Ansari, also speaking after yesterday's hearings.
There is so much to this story that nobody knows. There are decades worth of stories and information and a cover-up of this capacity to have allowed for the abuse of over 1,000 women over the course of decades, and then stories that demonstrate that Epstein and others were able to perpetuate the abuse beyond, even after the public knew. We know there's a lot more to this. And I think that this is the most corrupt administration in American history, and this story shows it more than anything. So we will keep fighting in honor of the survivors who are brave enough to put themselves out there for truth and justice, and we will not back down until there is full accountability and prevention from this ever happening again.
Well, I wonder whether there will ever be full accountability, and whether the rich and powerful that Anna Paulina spoke about will go to jail. Finally, here's Representative Tom Burchett.
These ladies were mistreated, of course, by Epstein and Maxwell, but also mistreated by our government. And we got to rethink the whole files thing. Apparently, there's some files that they don't want out. So I've said all along we need to protect these young ladies, well, they're ladies. I guess they were young, they were kids when it happened. So, yeah, we need to make sure we do that. And I think we're going to get there. I think we're going to get to the right spot where we can release everything that needs to be released. But again, in our rush to do this, we have to protect these ladies and these others that were involved.
Is that what they were advocating for in there, to keep some things private?
Are we protecting the ladies, or are we protecting the rich and powerful that abused them? That's the key question. Will charges ever be brought against anybody? And if Epstein was indeed an intelligence asset, who was he working for, and to what extent does the information he provided continue to have a hold over United States polity? Finally, we get to move on now to the big story of the day, the second biggest story. Talks in Beijing, of course, between Russia and China, according to Putin, taking their cooperation to an unprecedented level. The Chinese have been showing off their military, and according to the Daily Mail, this means we need to know whether or not we can stand up to them as China pushes for a new world order, how the alliance's military forces compare to the combined might of Beijing, Russia, and North Korea. Stand up. I always like these euphemisms used by corporate media. What does standing up to Russia and China look like? Does it mean provoking World War III? It is beginning to dawn on commentators in the West that the days of the Anglo-American Empire are coming to an end, and a vast new Eurasian trading bloc of the BRICS countries, and basically all countries that want to live in a world of peace and prosperity rather than one of endless Zionist-dominated wars, is being forged. This is CNN's take on the subject.
Putin has long been pushing for a multipolar world order, one that is less focused on U.S. and a unipolar world dominated by the U.S. being the global superpower. Is he getting that wish come true now?
Well, what we're seeing is this formation of
this Eurasian bloc that is strengthening its ties economically, militarily, diplomatically, and China is in the lead. You know, China wants to conquer the world through trade, through markets, vice through force, and replace the U.S. as the leading global power. And it's taking advantage of this moment when Trump has alienated people, so many nations, including India, which was becoming an ally, whereas in the previous White House administration, the Biden administration had used market forces and joining together to try to discipline China and Russia. In this case, however, we see that sort of method being thrown out the window, and now these tariffs producing a fusion of nations that haven't always had the West's best interests at heart, especially as we see with the war of aggression in Ukraine.
Yeah, and Modi making his first trip to China in some 7 years, coming after the U.S. slapped an additional 50% tariff on India for purchasing Russian oil and gas. And yet we saw those striking images of Modi not only sitting in Putin's motorcade for an hour for a meeting prior to walking in and meeting with other world leaders, but they walked in hand. The two countries have long had a close history dating back to the Cold War and the Soviet Union era. But do you envision this being an opportunity not only for Modi to get closer with Xi Jinping, but also with Vladimir Putin? These sanctions appear, at least optically, to only be bringing these two closer. They not only buy Russian oil and gas, we should note they also buy arms from Russia.
Yeah, Russia and India have always historically had close ties because Russia has time and time again helped India out militarily. Much of India's military manufacturing systems are based on Russian models and need to be resupplied by Russia. But what you also have is this new pressing together of the two sides because while India had been taking advantage, yes, of cheap Russian crude, India sells that Russian crude onwards to the European Union, which has doubled the amount that it buys from India. So inside India, you see this fury over what they see as a double standard. The EU escapes U.S. tariffs over secondhand purchase of Russian oil. China isn't facing tariffs over its much larger portions of Russian oil. All of that together spells out an India that is ready to do business with anyone but the U.S. right now.
Yeah, China, we should note, the largest buyer of Russian oil there. Kim Dozier, thank you so much. They don't believe how toxic this is. If you're
So there we go. Cooperation between the BRICS countries getting ever closer. And while, as we heard in that report, China wants to conquer the world with trade, nevertheless, they do have an increasingly formidable military strength, backed up, of course, by the largest standing army in the world, as we can see now in this report from Sky News.
Very good morning to you. China has showed off its military might to the world with a parade to mark the 80th anniversary since the defeat of Imperial Japan and the end of World War II. It began with an 80-gun salute to mark each year since the end of the war. Among those watching on from Tiananmen Square, Russian President Vladimir Putin and North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un. It's the first time the three leaders have met and formed part of China's leader's message of power, both military and diplomatic.
Chinese nation is the great nation that is never intimidated by any bullies and always values independence and forges ahead. In the past, when faced with critical struggles between good and evil, light and darkness, progress and reaction, the Chinese people rallied together to defy the enemy.
Well, we just had pictures come in moments ago of a bilateral meeting between President Putin and Kim Jong-un. Quite extraordinary to see there in a formal bilateral. If the pictures earlier of them all together at the broader celebrations weren't amazing enough to see, that's been taking place just moments ago. Well, our Asia correspondent, Helen Ann Smith, was at that parade and she filed this report.
This massive event only just finished. Already, almost immediately, they are starting to bus people out. But look, whatever you might think of the politics of what's happened here, the performance was absolutely remarkable. Just the precision, the accuracy, every boot, every turn of the head. In the stands we were in, you could literally feel them reverberating as the tanks rolled past, as the jets came overhead. And there was just this electric atmosphere of sort of anticipation and excitement from the crowds who were members of the public who were just in the area in front of where we were seated. It was a really spectacular show. Look, there's a couple of audiences, I think, for what's happened here today. One is absolutely the Chinese domestic audience. It is a crucial message that they are telling that, look, back 80 years ago, China was invaded and humiliated by Japan, but it was victorious. And just look what has happened since. China is now a major global superpower. It is on the rise, on the ascendancy. And by the way, that is thanks to, as they would say, the CCP and Xi Jinping. So loyalty and party dominance, absolutely a key theme here. Worth saying, actually, in some of the press briefings we had ahead of this event, the notion of loyalty to the party was actually listed as a more important objective than commemorating the end of the Second World War. So that shows just how important that is. But look, absolutely, this is not just about the domestic Chinese audience. Be in no doubt, there was big, important messages for the rest of the world as well. And the key message there is about Chinese power, Chinese might, Chinese ascendancy. And part of that is military power, of course, and that was pretty self-evident with the massive military sort of armory on show, the sort of hundreds of pieces of weaponry and equipment, some that have never been seen in public before, all of which have been Chinese made. The notion of battle readiness was absolutely a theme that's been continuously pushed this week as well, and certainly the island of Taiwan will be listening very closely to that. But look, it's not just about military power, it is also about political power and the power of allegiances, because this event has been noteworthy, not just because of what has been here and what we've seen, but because of who has been here as well. And it was so notable the whole way through. The host, President Xi Jinping, flanked to his right by Vladimir Putin of Russia and to his left by Kim Jong-un of North Korea. And look, there has been some analysts speculating that the recent closeness of Kim Jong-un and Vladimir Putin, and Kim has sent troops to help Putin in Ukraine of late, there's been some speculation that that has actually irked China, who is the historic ally of those two. Not a sign of that here today. Very much the messaging that these three are in lockstep, and I think absolutely unashamed about the fact that these three are proposing, if subtly or perhaps unsubtly, a new type of global order. So look, the power of China really is the message to take away today. Some questions, of course, whether during a week where it's really portrayed itself as a convener of nations, a builder of bridges, a master of diplomacy. Some questions, of course, about whether following that up with a huge military parade and flanked by leaders that many see as pariahs might be slightly undermining to that message. But it is there nonetheless, and perhaps only a country like China could pull it off.
Very interesting report, and it is indeed a new world order that's proposed. Don't get me wrong, I'm no more impressed by Chinese military hardware than I am by NATO military hardware, but it does seem like we are in a new Cold War, doesn't it? The sooner that Cold War becomes one of détente and talks about arms reductions, the better, as far as I'm concerned. But that's where we are at the moment on the international stage. Now I'm going to do a quick pivot to domestic issues and bring onto the stage both investigative journalist, my good friend Jacqui Devoy, and her colleague, the filmmaker Richie Brown. Richie, if you could look slightly over your right shoulder, you'd be looking at the camera a bit more, because at the moment you're looking, it's as if you're looking out the window. That's it. There we go. That's the direction you want to look. Okay, so right. So on with the second part of the show. Welcome to Ascending Order with me, Basil Valentine. I'm thrilled that you could join me. It seems like the whole of the UK, if not the entire world, certainly the sort of Anglosphere countries and Europe, are still heavily traumatized by the COVID farrago. It seems like a bad dream. Nobody really wants to go there. nobody wants to talk about it or think about it. All kinds of terrible things happened. Large number of suicides because people went out of business. People were deprived from seeing their loved ones in their last few moments. And of course, the subject of your film, Unseen, the truth about the death protocols. So first of all, Jacqui, we're going to play the trailer for the film in a minute, but give us the premise and what motivated you to make this film.
Well, it's kind of an update in a way, although it does cover it from start to finish, on the whole subject of involuntary euthanasia, which I discovered was going on back in 2020 in the care homes and the hospitals, and in some hospices as well. And a couple of people in their own homes were involuntarily euthanized, which is a euphemism for murdered, in their own homes. So this was something that caught my attention back in 2020, made the first film in 2021, A Good Death, with Iconic Media, made a second film last year called Playing God, which we crowdfunded. And then this is kind of an update really, but it does cover it, as I said, from start to finish, including a lot of the history of what's gone on and how it's affected people right up until 2025.
First of all, then, let's have a look at the trailer for the film, and you can see this on YouTube. Here we go. This is Unseen.
In 2020, as the world grappled with a global health crisis, a shadow fell over Britain's elderly and vulnerable. It was a harrowing story of betrayal and loss. Allegations have emerged that those in power, the bourgeoisie, the pharmaceutical industrial complex, and their lackeys in Parliament waged a calculated assault on the weakest members of society. Care homes and hospitals, once places of refuge and healing, were reported to have become sites of unimaginable horror, where families were denied access to their loved ones and controversial medical protocols led to countless deaths. The Scottish COVID inquiry opened some people's eyes to the scale of these events, exposing what some believe to be a deliberate effort by complicit media to obscure the truth. Reports of withheld food and water, the use of powerful sedatives like midazolam and morphine, and the blanket imposition of do not resuscitate orders paint a chilling picture.
Because that's it. I said, just give my mum palliative care medicines. I'm getting used charged with my 35 house to my mum. But we weren't allowed that. We weren't allowed to do anything.
These murders didn't take place in isolation, but in context of a giant population pyramid with an aging population. Rising pension liabilities, economic pressures, and a colossal national debt with a rotten economic mode of production incapable of solving these issues without a mass culling or a mass rearmament for war. One question remains. If the government claimed to prioritise protecting the elderly in 2020, why and how were protocols like NG163 and NG191, alleged to have hastened thousands of deaths, implemented? And now, with the passing of the assisted dying bill, has the narrative shifted from safeguarding our elderly and disabled loved ones to deeming them a burden? Britain in 2025 shows the decadence and wanton disregard for human life characteristic of a neo-fascist character. This is Unseen, the truth behind the death protocols. In this documentary, investigative journalist Jacqui Devoy and me, filmmaker Richie Brown, follow the stories of 8 families devastated by these state-sanctioned protocols where politicians, doctors and nurses were empowered to decide who should live and who should die. Despite the Scottish COVID inquiry receiving scant attention, even from alternative media, the testimonies we heard compelled us to shine a light on a very dark chapter in Britain's history, a chapter marked by moral decay and a chilling disregard for human life. Join us as we uncover the truth behind these protocols and confront the uncomfortable questions they raise.
The shielding of vulnerable people and the elderly, who are the most affected by this virus, that is in our plan.
Basically, and I think that's why it's very difficult for me to get over it.
She got morphine and midazolam. It's the first, even asking the question, first time I'd known about the use of midazolam. I realised I'd actually let it happen on my watch, and I'd gone in to stop it and still never stopped it.
I think the midazolam and morphine was a massive factor because I feel like even with the ventilator.
So do you know if she had been put
Yes, yeah, they put her on that. They said she was 76, she's coming to the end of her life. And my mum was nothing like it. She had nothing wrong with her at all. She was as fit as me. And the only thing she was doing was grieving my dad.
Has been told that Matt Hancock wanted the ultimate say on who should live and who should die.
Really chilling stuff in there, Jackie. Matt Hancock wanted the ultimate say on who should live and who should die. And also very revealing that the population pyramid with an aging population and a mass cull may have been behind that agenda.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, they're known about this aging population for decades, so this is something they've been preparing for, and you see it in their documents. Operation Lockstep, where they describe in detail basically the COVID pandemic, but that document was released in 2010, and then you had all their pandemic exercises leading up to this, from Event 201 to the Cladex exercise in 2018 to what was the other one, Atlantic Storm in like 2011, I'm going to say. And then you had even Operation Dark Winter, which was back in 2001.
So how many people in all do you think had their lives ended prematurely? I mean, we heard from that chap there in the trailer, his mother was 76, and he was told that she was coming to the end of her life. The Beatles drummer, Ringo Starr, is 80.
Yeah, a lot of the people we interviewed and that I've interviewed over the last 5 years, their loved ones have been a lot younger. I set up a support group in 2021 just to keep everyone that I was interviewing in one place for films and stuff and articles. And in that group, the loved one of the youngest in victims are 21, 28, 17. There's none in their 30s, a couple in their 40s. Several in their 50s, lots in their 60s, and then 70s, 80s, and 90s. But yeah, as young as 17, the victims have been. This was a grandmother who joined the group, but she hasn't really been interacting that much because she can't tell the rest of the family what she knows. So she's just kept a very low profile. And this happens a lot. The 28-year-old is a lovely girl, American girl. I had her mum Rebecca on my show when I was doing a show for Unity News Network. Then there's several people that we've spoken to with relatives who were extremely young when they died, when they were killed on these deathly protocols. So here in this country, the NG163 protocol was brought in 2020, April 2020. That was reviewed. Matt Hancock gave it to a panel of doctors and professors to review it. Dr. Sam Ahmadzi, who is one of the best known palliative care specialists in the world, actually wrote a report on this for the BMJ, the British Medical Journal, which is still available. I just had a look yesterday to see if it's still available, and it is online. In this, he says that he and the other panel, the rest of the panel, said that this protocol, NG163, was extremely dangerous and would kill people. So Matt Hancock said, thank you very much, and implemented it anyway. And that was in place for some time. And this is the initial guideline, nice guideline, that was actually killing people, because it was almost identical to the Liverpool Care Pathway, which was abolished in 2014 and which we think was snuck in under this new name of NG163 through the back door and used on so-called COVID patients, so people coming in with anything that vaguely presented as a respiratory issue, and sometimes not. In some cases, they were just going in with some other minor ailment. One lady went in because she felt a bit dizzy. Next day, she was dead. So there are lots and lots of stories like this. I've literally spoken to probably over 1,000 families now in the last 5 years. And I've got nearly 200 of them in the support group now, all willing to speak out. I've been trying to get their stories published for the last 4.5 years. No one's interested. That's why we've made these films. That's why I made the first one. That's why I made the second one. And that's why we made this one, because 5 years on, it's still not being addressed by the mainstream media. And all the editors I speak to, they are sick of the sight and sound of me, to be honest, because every so often I'm saying, are you ready to run that story yet? They just ignore me now, but I'm not going to, I am a dog with a bone. I'm not going to give up. So yeah, that's sort of what's happened.
I'm very pleased to hear it, Jacqui. Now, what does this death protocol actually consist of in terms of, you know, let's say I had presented myself with a runny nose, admitted to hospital back in 2020 or something, and it had been decided that in my late 50s, mid 50s, I needed to be put on an end of life pathway. Who was making that decision, and then what would have happened to me next?
They didn't call it an end of life pathway. It was a COVID protocol, but it was an end of life pathway disguised as such. So you'd go in, they'd put you on NG163 if they thought you had COVID. A lot of people weren't even tested. Not that the tests worked anyway, but a lot of people were just put on this protocol. It's like, because they needed to get the numbers up. Remember, this was the very early days when they needed to scare the pants off people, as Matt Hancock admitted to. So the more people they could kill in hospitals and care homes. And this is very interesting as well, because very, very few so-called COVID deaths happened in people's homes. They were always happening in hospitals and care homes and hospices under these protocols. So if COVID really existed and really was a terrible, dangerous killer virus, people would be dropping dead in the streets, in the supermarkets, at the railway station, and in their own homes. And that wasn't happening. So that said a lot. People were being herded into hospitals and care homes. No visitors were allowed. There was no one to advocate for them or care for them or stand up for them. And they were literally being bumped off. And you mentioned a number. I did an article based around Wilson's size research into the UK numbers of people who were killed under this protocol. And it was the headline article in the Light a few months ago, actually back in March, I think. And he put it at 55,000, but we know it's way more than that. They're just the ones that have been recorded. Sorry, I'm waffling on a bit there, Richie. You might
No, not at all.
Yeah,
Richie, go on.
Yeah, go for it. So there was also NG191, which they recommended using the failed drug remdesivir. And it's quite interesting that the World Health Organization had an article up saying that this remdesivir drug does not treat COVID at all. And they put that up at the time. However, they quickly took that page down, so you can only access it via archive.org and the Wayback Machine, where they've archived that web page. But if you read it, it says this does not work. But we do know that remdesivir causes liver and kidney failure. That's why it killed so many people in the early trials when it was used for Ebola in Africa. And they sought to bring that back because Anthony Fauci had the patents for that. It's the same people that were involved in the HIV/AIDS scam, where they basically gave AZT, this cell terminating drug, to people that they so-called had AIDS, because they were using the same PCR test to test for HIV as they eventually did for COVID. And the inventor of the PCR, what's his name, Carrie Mullis, said that you should never use this as a diagnostic. So we're using this faulty tool to diagnose so-called COVID cases, and then at the same time we're bumping people off in hospitals on a care pathway. And I was reading one of the other documents, NG165. So that was one of the documents between NG163 and NG191. And in that they wanted to treat pneumonia differently. They weren't prescribing antibiotics, like a simple antibiotic for pneumonia. So if you got pneumonia and you went in and they determined that you had COVID pneumonia as opposed to normal pneumonia, you wouldn't get antibiotics and you would probably die of pneumonia. So they used many different ways. I mean, we've discussed this quite a lot, like midazolam and morphine, ventilators, like putting you on a ventilator, which is a whole ordeal in itself. If you go on a ventilator, you don't have, for starters, it's quite an extreme thing because you don't have much of a survival rate to begin with. If you take remdesivir, you're going to have liver and kidney failure. So I'm sure people remember those articles saying that COVID causes liver and kidney failure, but no, it wasn't that. It was the drug that they were giving them under NG191.
Yeah, they kept shifting the goalposts when it came to the symptoms. You know, I don't know if you remember all the ridiculous things that they were coming up with. You know, these drugs were causing terrible failures in the body. You know, organs shutting down, like you said, the liver, the kidneys. They were caused these drugs as well. Midazolam, which is a benzodiazepine. If you use a benzodiazepine with an opioid such as morphine, which they were doing, and it actually, you can see on our film there was a little highlighted bit of the NG163 document which says, you know, this is saying to the nurses who are administering these drugs, you may notice, you know, that this causes terrible issues with breathing, and if you notice this, just ignore it and carry on. Basically, that's it. That's what it was actually saying. And so they were told, yeah, when these drugs are used together, any nurse or doctor would know that it depresses respiration to the point where it actually stops. So it starts off with, say you're at the point where you're doing 30 breaths a minute. Within a short period of time, that will become 20 breaths a minute, 10 breaths a minute, 5 breaths a minute. And then if you keep administering the drug, which they were doing through syringe drivers, which continuously pump the drug into the body, if you don't stop that at some point, the breathing is eventually going to completely subside and stop, and then you're dead. And this is what they're doing. And these two drugs are known, especially when they're used concomitantly, to cause death. Basically, they use these drugs in a cocktail for execution in some states in America. In several states, they've been withdrawn because it's considered too barbaric. It's been said that death row prisoners have said they'd rather die in the electric chair than by lethal injection because it's absolutely a most terrible, agonizing death. And being electrocuted in the chair is somehow better because they know people that have gone through it and seen it. So, but that's the combination of drugs that they're using on our elderly and vulnerable people in care homes and hospitals back then. It's still going on. I'm getting reports from people, I'd say on a weekly basis now, but back in 2020 and 2021, just hundreds it was happening all over. And it was only when I first spoke out about it on, I think I spoke to David Icke about it on one of his podcasts, because he'd been looking into it as well. And once we did that, a lot of people started coming forward because a lot of people don't want to believe it. They're thinking, well, the NHS wouldn't do that. You know, they wouldn't hurt us. They're there to heal us and cure us. They're not going to give us drugs that kill us. But I think a lot of people now have woken up to the fact that they don't want us to live. They either want us as customers forever, or if you're old and costing them too much money, like a lot of elderly and very sick people do, terminally ill people, they deem it better for these people to not exist anymore.
Yes, the Bill Gates death panels. But where did these orders and new protocols first originate, Richie? Have you been able to uncover that in the film? I'm always looking for the kernel of evil, as it were, who gave the orders as well as those who followed them.
Yeah, so the NICE governance is managed. They set it up as like an external so-called external organization, presumably so they could fob off the blame to it and then abolish it when this is all uncovered.
So NICE is National Institutes for Clinical Excellence or something, isn't it? Yeah,
that's the one, yeah. And but no, it reports directly back to the Health Secretary. So the people responsible for this at the time was the Tory government. They instituted these protocols, and you had to follow them on pain of being fired by the hospital administrators. So I mean, the buck stops there. I mean, I think there's a whole another element of kind of the psychopathy of some of the nurses and doctors involved in this, where they just seem to have a complete disregard for human life. I mean, I said to you last time that in our society at the moment, doctors and scientists are basically white collar criminals that deserve prison. And I think there's quite a lot to be said for that, because if you watch our documentary, you'll see some of the absolute, completely detached psychopathy going on. Yeah, I mean, Jacqui has an incredible story about skin and trying to harvest someone's skin. I think
I mentioned that to you, Basil. One of the ladies in my group, as soon as her husband was killed, literally seconds later, she was asked, "Can we have his skin?" She said she could not understand, she couldn't comprehend that they were actually saying that to her. She thought she was imagining things, and she said, "I'm sorry." And they said, "He's got lovely skin, we can use that." And she was like, this was literally seconds after the man had been killed. So there are some terrible horror stories, and I'm putting a lot of them in a book. There's so many that we couldn't fit them all in the 3 documentaries so far. I mean, this documentary we've had the most, I think, is it 8, 9 or 10? Anyway, there's a lot in this one, whereas there's only been 5 or 6 in previous ones. So I've put together a book. It's about to be published. Mark Atwood is actually publishing it for us with through his publishing company, which is great. And it's over 30 stories at the moment. We're just doing the final edit from people from my group telling their stories. But I could fill 10 books, you know, easily.
Trauma-based mind control is the term that comes to mind in terms of getting doctors to behave in ways that are antithetical to the Hippocratic Oath. It seems like a crisis of sufficient magnitude was synthesized back in those days, that it caused people to behave in irrational ways. Who wants to take that?
There's definitely a huge element of that. There was a lot of the behavior was driven by fear. A lot of people believed, you know, that what was going on, that there was a killer virus on the loose and that we're all going to die, you know. So people were acting with that in mind. When it comes to the psychopathic actions of some of the doctors and nurses, I found it really hard to believe that these were our normal doctors and nurses. So you know, most doctors and nurses are fantastic. You know, they've got a vocation to help people and cure and heal people and look after people. But we were faced with this new breed of nurse and new breed of doctor that didn't seem to be anything like the ones we were used to. And I've heard the same story over and over from so many people about nurses who won't look them in the eye, don't even speak sometimes. They don't have name badges on. They were unfriendly, cold, robotic, and even sadistic. So some of the things that I've heard that nurses said to the families of these people that were being euthanized are quite horrendous and unbelievable. But when you experience this and when you've had that happen to you, these things stick in your mind. You know, you never forget. You remember every single word. You remember every single minute of what happened, and which made me wonder, where have these weird nurses come from? Where have these nasty medics? Where do they get them? And a few of the people I've spoken to, when they tried to track down these medics to report them, they've disappeared. They don't seem to exist. So were they brought in? And Richie's got some ideas on this. What do you think, Richie?
Yeah, so Ken McCarthy appears in the documentary, and he makes the following point, that a lot of the nurses and doctors were just sort of waived during the COVID era. So previously, if you had got a doctorate, say, for example, in Africa or South America or even Europe, and you went to America, you would start right at the bottom. You had to redo your certifications, but they waived that during that period. So all these people were working in ICU units or emergency units that never have worked in a emergency unit before. Their doctorate with medicine may have been something completely different, like with pediatrics, with children, or whatever. And they were all working in these, and then following these protocols, and then being surprised that people are dying, like coming away really shocked that, we put 10 people on ventilators and COVID's really killed them. So there was that element to it. There was also the element that if you're bringing in a huge migration force to work in your hospitals, their visas are tied to their job. So if they lose their job, they're likely that they're out of there. They're out of the country. So there's kind of a double coercion going on from the hospital administrators and from the fact that they'll lose their visa if they lose their job. And then so you have all these people working. I mean, there's an example in Unseen where Deborah recounts that the person that checked in her partner was also the doctor, the same name. And it's like, so it's quite, you can see how they did it and how they managed to do it for all that, because if you have a whole migration workforce that is basically at the beck and call of the hospital administrators as well as their visas, they're going to do whatever. It's very troubling.
Finally, we've only got a couple of minutes left. Tell us about the film, guys, where people can see it, and how you made it. Richie.
Yeah, so you can see it. Yeah, you can see it on YouTube. We do have a crowdfunder for it, so please feel free to donate for that, as we didn't get paid for it. So that'd be excellent if you could. You can see it on YouTube. We've got the other interviews up on YouTube as well. And yeah, we spent a couple of weekends just driving up around the country and interviewing these people and getting their stories. I definitely advise you to watch it. It's quite harrowing, so brace yourself for that.
And last word, Jacqui, any chance of any accountability for these deaths?
I hope so. I mean, quite a few people are starting to go legal, but as we all know, that can cost hundreds of thousands of pounds, and you're up against the NHS and you're up against the government. So not many people are able to actually take that step and go legal, but there are cases going on in the background. I've been attending an inquest since March this year. We did a week in March, then we did a week in the middle of August, and it was suspended in very suspicious sort of circumstances, and it's going to be resumed in December. So we don't know what the outcome of that is going to be. We don't know whether people will be held accountable. I hope so, but if someone is held accountable for this one particular death, then the floodgates will open, and a lot of people will be stepping forward, possibly hundreds of thousands, saying this happened to a member of my family as well.
Perhaps then the story will get the coverage it deserves, and indeed your film. Thank you, Jacqui Devoy and Richie Brown. Thank you so much for joining me today on Ascending Order here on Unprecedented TV. If you've joined the show late, do go back and watch the rest. I'll be back at the same time tomorrow with more geopolitics, presenting the news that you don't see on the BBC. My own special news edit daily here on Unprecedented TV. But for now, it's bye from me, Basil Valentine, and see you all again tomorrow.
Unfiltered, uncensored, unprecedented TV.